Hey, it's Jordan with TYT Network, here in New York. Busy day today in the New York election primary lawsuit. A lot of legal terms and legalese that I won't try to bullshit you through. So I'm going to flip it around here to Jonathan Clark, who's one of the attorneys who filed the original lawsuit that sought to get all provisional ballots counted in the New York primary. Last we spoke, you were going to file an emergency order to get certification for the primary results stopped.
Right.
That happened, but there's been kind of a audible since then. Tell us what's going on.
Right. So we filed the emergency order to show cause, and we served it on the boards of election within Nassau County, Suffolk County, and the city. And after
Emergency order to show cause essentially means like a restraining order or
right, it's a way to get into court really quickly to get a temporary restraining order. After I served on the New York City Board of Elections, I got a pretty prompt call from Michael Ryan and his chief counsel and a few other people at the Board of Elections.
Michael Ryan is the New York City Board of Elections head.
Yeah, he's the head of the New York City Board of Elections, and he asked me that if I could hold off on the temporary restraining order, simply because what we were asking for, the relief that we were asking for in the action, pretty much they were complying with. Unfortunately, this hasn't been really communicated well to the public. Mike Ryan told us that he's going back through the voter history and trying to find out every step that that person had within their voter registration. So if you registered in 1995, changed 5 different times, and then voted, they're going to have a history of all those 5 different changes. And that's going to be the thing that they use to determine whether your affidavit ballot is going to be counted or not.
So they're going back and counting through everybody who filed a provisional or affidavit ballot in New York City.
New York City.
Not New York State.
Not New York State.
But so everybody who filed a provisional ballot in New York City, they're going back, we think, their entire voting history. So this could be, decades.
Right, it could be, yes.
And they're looking at what party they were registered as. They're looking at when they moved, and what's the final barometer that they're going to be deciding whether that person should be counted.
Right. So what they're going to look at, I guess, is the last step that you made, and they're going to have to look at it in context with all the other ones. So it's a little bit unclear, and that's still the problem as to how they come to that final determination whether it's a valid vote or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that part is still unclear, but at least we're having a confirmation that they're doing more than a service analysis on the affidavit ballots.
So certification, we thought was going to be today. Now it's a little blurry if it's today, tomorrow, but
right.
it's coming soon. So if certification happens, is this all for naught, or the process that they're doing to decide whether to count provisional ballots will be retroactively the ones that are counted will go into the final result?
Right. So certification, it's sort of symbolic in some sense. There's been a couple occasions before in New York City where they've certified an election and they went back and looked at affidavit ballots, absentee ballots, and they got added or subtracted from the total. So the certification just sort of formally starts the process where everything will become official. And what's good about certification, though, for us that want provisional ballots counted, is it kicks in another statute, which is 16-106, which entitles someone, if they did cast an affidavit ballot and it was rejected, now they can take that rejection to a court and they can have an actual judge say whether that affidavit ballot was good or not. So now we have to sort of move into the second part of our strategy to try to get these votes counted.
So, number one, when do people know? How do people know if their affidavit ballot weren't counted? Because this process, we should say, they gave you, 20 days?
Yeah, that according to the statute 16-106, you have 20 days to challenge the Board of Elections determination on your affidavit ballot. The problem was when I was talking to Michael Ryan, he said that there's so many of these affidavit ballots, it's questionable whether they can get them all out within that 20-day period. So that's going to sort of leave you effectively with no remedy because the statute of limitations is going to close on you before you actually get your notice. So
if people don't get a letter or whatever they're doing saying you've been denied within this 20-day statute, what do they do?
Right. So I brought that up to him, and he may regret saying this, but he said that If you think that your vote isn't going to be counted, the Board of Elections, you can go to them and they'll look for your affidavit ballot and give you all the reasons why it wasn't counted or was counted. So he's telling me, and he might regret it, but he might get a rush of people going down to the Board of Elections now. And he said that it's going to be made available to people if they come request it.
Now,
he didn't say it was going to be instantaneous, though. He said that you might have to wait a day or two to find it since there's so many of them.
people are asking, what about other counties? I'm assuming they mean
Right.
Long Island, Westchester.
So from what I understand, because of the lawsuit that we filed and because of the investigations from the New York Attorney General and Scott Stringer, New York City Board of Elections, so the 5 boroughs in New York City, they're really going the extra mile to make sure that these affidavit ballots are counted, or at least they have a paper trail behind them. The problem now is in all of New York State, they didn't have this impetus to actually verify everything. So there's not going to be that paper trail in Nassau County, Suffolk County, upstate, wherever. So at this point, if you live in one of those counties, when the election is certified, you got to go down to your local Board of Election, find out whether you've been counted or not, and start to you're going to have to try to do an investigation to see if you can do what the Board of Elections in New York City basically was doing on its own to get your voter history, so you can go to court and prove it.
So if they're only taking the initiative in New York City, if somebody from Long Island goes down and they're basically told, we're not part of that, which is possible.
Right.
So what are they to do? Essentially, be the,
Well, this is what we're trying to figure out at Election Justice USA. I mean, they have an absolute right to know whether their vote has been counted or not. There's a statutory provision that requires the Board of Elections to notify them with a letter explaining why their vote wasn't counted. So that absolutely has to happen. When they do get that notification, under, like I said, the statute 16106, they have the right to take that to court to challenge it. So what Election Justice USA wants to do is we want to try to set up a network where we can organize all of these people that have voted by affidavit and have been rejected, because we want to somehow get them representation throughout New York State.
If they want to just go down essentially today and find out if their provisional ballot got counted, they might not get instantaneous. But once, let's say they're told, no, it wasn't counted, they can then go in front of a judge?
Right. Well, they're not going to be able to do it today because the statute doesn't kick in. They can't actually make a challenge until the election, New York State certifies it. So from the point of New York State certification, they have 20 days from that point. So today it's not going to happen. But as soon as it's certified, they should try to find out whether their affidavit was counted or not.
But if they're told no, they go to a judge at the Board of Elections or a judge elsewhere?
No, it's going to be a New York State judge, so New York State court. And that's going to be the other problem now, is how do we prove it? I mean, within our lawsuit, we had some fantastic people that really documented everything that was going on because they were very worried about Arizona, so they had to step up. But a lot of people, they're not even, they're going to be behind and they're not going to be able to get the information. So that's what we're going to try to do at Election Justice USA, is to try to find some way where we can get these people the information they need, either through freedom of information or somehow.
And in terms of how many provisional ballots if we're just talking New York City, how are we going to know how many provisional ballots were cast?
At this point we don't know. Michael Ryan might announce how many were counted at this point, but I don't know, and I don't know if he knows yet himself.
But presumably, if he's taken the step to go all the way back in history, this isn't 20 provisional ballots.
No, absolutely not.
This is a lot of...
Yeah, I mean, and just on Long Island out here, one election, it was called electric district, had about 20 affidavit ballots, which is a lot for just a small area, which is basically a couple neighborhoods. So I can only imagine what New York City is.
Now here's the question, and you don't want to say the wrong thing, obviously, because Ryan seems like he's going the extra mile, but why should people trust that the Board of Elections is, on the up and up, going through these ballots, and they're really going the extra mile, and it's happening in a transparent, nonpartisan way?
Right. Well, I don't think they should. So I think you should find out whether you've been counted or not. And Mr. Ryan said that he's going to have the affidavits with the proof behind it, and they can request it. So I wouldn't take his word for it. I would go down there and find out myself.
So essentially, if you weren't counted, you're supposed to get communication.
Right.
But since that communication might not come within these 20 days, if you were counted, you wouldn't know either.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, if people want to know, if people in New York City cast a provisional ballot and they want to know, they got to go down to the Board of Elections to find out.
Yeah, they're going to have to find out.
We don't know if that means Brooklyn Board of Elections, Manhattan Board of Elections, Queen,
Yeah, my intuition, and I'm just drawing this from the clouds, but I think that if you're in New York City, then you got to go to New York City Board of Elections. I think that's where they maintain everything. If it's Nassau County, obviously Nassau County.
Right, but what I'm just logistically, are there different locations for Board of Elections, or it's all one in Brooklyn?
Well, there's one in Brooklyn, and the main one, the New York City Board of Elections, which covers all the different boroughs. It's on Broadway. I forgot the number. 32 Broadway, I believe.
Okay, and in terms of it's not known if we'll find out the provisional ballot number, but let's say people take it upon themselves to initiate and go down. They are told theirs wasn't counted. They then go to a judge. A certain percentage are counted. We don't want to give false hope. So this is not going to, swing the election to a Bernie Sanders. Right. This is really just about getting your vote counted. It might alter the count somewhat, but give us some insight into that.
Yeah, well, it's not absolutely clear. I mean, if you go on the New York State Board of Elections, you can see that there's certain congressional districts, because the way this is done is through congressional districts. So it's basically you have to win congressional districts to get the delegates. So some congressional districts are relatively close, within thousands of votes. So it could swing, say in Suffolk County, where I think there's only a difference of 1,500. Maybe there might be 1,500 provisional ballots affidavit ballots out there.
Right, but Suffolk County is in Long Island. Only the New York City Board of Elections is going back into the history of people who filed provisional ballots.
Right, yeah, New York City is the only one doing the work for you, but this is a New York State law, 16106. So it's if you live in Ithaca, you can do it. If you live in Freeport,
so people who want to do this, it's 16103. That's what they should cite.
16106.
16106, and spell that out. What is that cite?
So that's the New York State election law, 16-106, and this is what gives you the ability to challenge the rejection of your affidavit ballot in state court. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're going to have to reference when you challenge it.
And so if Ryan is taking this, what was his rationale for taking the steps to do this?
Well, because the lawsuit was filed, so he had that as something that he had to live up to. And he said he was trying to live up to the provisions within our lawsuit. Also, the New York State Attorney General is overseeing everything that's going on. So there's a lot of people there's a lot of oversight, and I don't think he wants to run afoul of any of that. Mm-hmm. So that's my feeling from that.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, by you filing something to stop certification, this is a better step because this actually has somewhat of a chance of getting a portion, as many provisional ballots counted as possible.
Right. I think if we're organized and we motivate people to get out there and check whether their affidavit ballot is counted, that's going to be much more effective than anything at this point.
So what can people do outside of just find out where their Board of Election is and where they live? And beyond that, what can they do? Because you're one lawyer, your partner's another lawyer. You've been pretty much working 24/7 for the past month on this.
Right.
I would assume you're talking about building a network. So yes. What do people do?
Well, that's the thing. I think we're going to have to try to find, if you're an attorney and you live anywhere in New York State, within any of the counties, I think you should try to contact Election Justice USA and say that you're going to be willing to volunteer to represent the people within your county. So, I mean, what do we have? 72 counties in New York State. So mm-hmm. Hopefully there'll be 72 attorneys, one willing to take each county mm-hmm. and represent these people.
And that's just Election Justice USA site. Reach out to them.
Right.
Subject line: attorney willing to help.
Right. Exactly.
And you have 20 days for this process, starting when? Today?
No, starting when New York State certifies. So
okay.
Looks like New York City is going to certify their results today, and then send it up to the New York State Board of Elections. And when the New York State Board of Elections certifies, then it kicks in the statute.
Okay. And only people who file provisional ballots because they are registered Democrats and were incorrectly taken off the roll should be doing this.
Right.
It's not like independents who willy-nilly went down there and voted on provisional ballots.
Right. If you're an independent and you went and voted as a protest or something to that effect, then don't even bother. It's not gonna work.
It's people who genuinely think they're democratically registered.
Right.
And were kicked off the rolls.
Absolutely.
Okay, gotcha. All right, we'll keep in contact with you, and I will keep the audience up to date on when certification happens. But essentially, people, once certification happens, if they want to be proactive and not wait for some phantom letter in the mail, they should go to their Board of Election,
Right.
site
16106.
16106, ask, was my provisional ballot counted?
Right.
You might not get it right away, might get it in a day or two. If you weren't, then if it wasn't counted, you could go to a judge. Where would the judge be? New York State Supreme Court?
Yes.
Which is in Manhattan.
Manhattan. Well, there's one in Queens. There's there's
So they would give you that information where you would go.
right. And I mean, you know, that's the thing is if you're waiting for this letter, a lot of people were kicked off the voter rolls because they were sent a letter to the wrong address. So, you know, the letter may not help you too much. You should absolutely go down there and find out whether your vote was counted or not.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for the help. Again, Jonathan Clark, his partners Blair Fellows, Clark and Fellows law firm.
Clark and Fellows.
And eventually you have to go back to working to get paid.
Yeah, eventually I got to get paid. That would help.